Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and I wanted to answer some of the comments that I've recently gotten on some of the videos that I've put out, just kind of highlighting some of the items that I've picked up from GameStop over the last few months. I do have a mid-year pickups video coming up where I'll showcase pretty much all the GameStop pickups that I've added to my collection. And you're just looking at a few of them here, right? So a very clean Game Boy Micro. Uh, we have a really clean PS Vita, some really clean and uncommon original Game Boy games. We got Biker Mice from Mars, a mint condition complete in box copy of Gunstar Heroes, and even a recent NES pickup of Darkwing Duck here. And some of the comments that I've gotten were one comment was, they wanted to know which GameStop I go to specifically. That's usually where the comments surround, where they're at. So I want to talk about, again, like my really quick, I'm going to spend like 2 minutes just recapping my GameStop strategy for getting deals like these. And then I also want to talk about why I think the window is closing on GameStop as like one of the last viable options for certain retro games. So let's first talk about which GameStop I go to. So I go to all of them. I'm just gonna say that. I go to all of them. I go to every GameStop I know about, and I try to visit those GameStops a few times a month because it's really the luck of the draw. It's really about how many times you go and, you know, whether or not you're lucky enough to find something one of those times that you go. And thankfully, I've been lucky enough to go into some GameStops and, find some really good deals. Now, one of the comments that I get is, well, Y2K, the GameStops near me have nothing. This is true. If you do not live in a major city, right? Like I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, but I pretty much moved from the New York metropolis to the LA metropolis, pretty much. And so because of that, I'm in two regions of the country where there are going to be a lot of retro games available, not just because of the games that the company ships to these stores from their warehouse, but also because of the games that get traded in by the locals. When you live in a major city where there's a lot of people, that means there's just a lot more people that are going to be bringing games for trade in. And then that in turn is just going to create more inventory for you, the shopper who's looking to buy games from GameStop. So I think that, if you're someone, you live in a really small town, maybe there's one GameStop, in your area, it's not going to be a viable option for you. And I could just say that, straight out the gate, if you are trying to leverage GameStop for video games, if you're trying to leverage GameStop to build your collection, you're going to have a harder time if you live in a small town. Now, believe it or not, almost everything you see here, with the exception of this PlayStation Vita, was ordered on GameStop's website, which is another thing that I get a lot of comments about. Y2K, I never see these games. These games are never on the website when I look. I never find them. I never see them. I know that I am not the only one that finds rare games on GameStop's website because I've met people in person who've been able to pick up really rare titles from GameStop's website. But it's not easy because there's thousands, if not millions, of people shopping the website all the time. And so it's one of those things that you just kind of have to be on it. You have to be on it. You have to be on the website, checking it pretty consistently to catch some things. And you kind of have to know which categories to go after. I find a lot of original Game Boy games on the website because original Game Boy just isn't something that a lot of people look for, especially on GameStop's website. I don't even think there's a lot of people collecting for the original Game Boy. For me, the original Game Boy is super nostalgic. So that's why I've been able to find really cool titles on the original Game Boy because it's just a niche. I feel like it's one of those, it's Nintendo, and Nintendo always sells really fast, but it's just not a console that a lot of people really think about because, it's old school. It's like the black and white version of Nintendo. And a lot of people have already moved on from Nintendo, so no one really wants to buy Game Boy games. But there are a lot of really good and fun Game Boy games out there. And if you didn't grow up with it, it's just not going to be something that you're like looking for. So that's why I think I have luck with Game Boy. Another console that I have luck with is Sega Genesis. Not a lot of people really go after the Sega Genesis, especially on the website. Not to say that no one's looking for Genesis games, but people aren't really looking for that stuff. You know, a lot of people who shop on GameStop's website that are resellers, they look for items that resell fast. So they're typically going to be in the, you know, the Wii section, the GameCube section, the Switch section. They're probably going to be looking at like PlayStation, DS, 3DS. They're going to be looking for stuff like that. They're not really going to be looking at like Sega Genesis, Sega Saturn. You know, a lot of times they're not even going to be looking at like NES. They're going to probably be concentrating on Super Nintendo and up, like N64, stuff like that. So I tend to win in the areas that I know people are not looking, you know, they're not looking for, you know, and I know that a lot of people, again, aren't really looking for original Game Boy like that. And there are less people looking for like Sega Genesis than there are looking for Super Nintendo. And I mean, believe it or not, Super Nintendo is starting to get to that NES level in terms of interest. You know, I don't really know how many like young resellers really go after Super Nintendo games like that. I'm sure this is not to say that no one cares about Super Nintendo games. Obviously, the interest for Super Nintendo games is really still high, still super high. Um, but what I'm starting to see is that a lot of Super Nintendo games are sitting a lot more both in the store and on the website, especially if it's like Super Mario World, Super Mario All Stars, Super Mario Kart. You know, the only games that really kind of go fast for the Super Nintendo are the uncommon games like Biker Mice from Mars, which I got on their website. Even a game like Super Metroid will sometimes sit for a little bit. Now, it won't sit that long. Like if a copy of Super Metroid lands on the site, it might sit for a day, but after pretty much 24 hours, it's going to be gone because that's one that usually goes fast, and it's because GameStop typically has that underpriced. So that's what you kind of see there. And again, with the website, it's one of those things where you just kind of have to be on top of it. For me, I feel like it's a really great opportunity, especially when you can catch them on, you know, one of their promotions. Like they just finished up a buy two get one. I crushed the buy two get one. They had a buy more save more. I crushed that because when you leverage those types of promotions, you can get games at an average of 40 to 45% off market value. Sometimes you can get even up to 60% off, depending on whether or not GameStop has the game priced below market value to begin with. So it's just one of those things of consistency. That's my point. My point is consistency. If you're only looking at the website once a month, or if you go to your local GameStop like once a month, it's just you're not giving yourself enough opportunities to find anything worthwhile. You really have to be willing to just go and not really find anything enough times until you do find something. And eventually you will go there, you'll get into the store, and you'll be there either right after someone traded something really cool in or right as someone's trading something really cool in, and then you can kind of swoop in and just steal the deal right then and there. So there's that. Now, I do think the window for taking advantage of GameStop is kind of closing. I do. I genuinely do. Just because of what I see them doing. Like now they're back to buying broken consoles again. You know, and more importantly, they're slowly inching up. Not slow, yeah, they're gradually inching up all of the prices for their retro games. Like they're pretty much at market value for almost all of their retro games. The only time that you'll find a retro game that's really priced under market value is if it's a game that they don't sell that much and they really don't know how much to sell it for. So, you know, if they're not really sure, they might, I'm sure someone on their pricing team is like looking at eBay or whatever, and they might price it close to eBay, maybe 5-10% under eBay or market value. But for the most part, a lot of their games, if not all of their games, are priced at market value. But there are still some that, again, because they don't sell enough copies of those games, they're still underpriced. A good example would be like Batman, the animated series. Batman, the animated series is a game that probably sells anywhere between $75 and $100 loose cart for the original Game Boy, but they still have it priced at $44.99 without factoring in any discounts or promotions. So they still have this underpriced, probably because they don't sell a lot of copies of Batman. Same thing with Ninja Shadow. They still have Ninja Shadow priced at like $40 or $45, but how many times are they selling a copy of Ninja Shadow? Not that many. But then you have a game like Cold Shadow, which Cold Shadow they have, I think, priced over market value. I think they have this one priced at somewhere around like $60, whereas Cold Shadow is only like a $45 game. So it kind of varies with GameStop. You have to be kind of mindful of what you're doing. But a game like Biker Mice from Mars, I think they have this one priced pretty close to market value. I think they have this one at like $85 or so. So they've got it right there. But then sometimes you can get a really clean steal where they'll have like a copy of Gunstar Heroes priced at 54, because that is the loose price of the game, but they're going to sell you the game at the loose price, whether it's complete in box or not. And so that's where you can kind of win. I do think though that I can see a day where GameStop starts to differentiate their pricing between loose versus CIB, versus boxed. I don't know how long it'll be before they get there. Somebody said that it would just be too much for them to do. They're too lazy. They're never going to do it. But if they really start to lean into this whole collectibles thing, I can see them doing that. But I think once they get to that point, the window to really capitalize on the things that they just have not really caught up to yet will be over. And the only real benefit to buying retro games from GameStop will be the 7-day return policy, the warranties that you can buy in the games if you choose to do so, and just having like a brick and mortar store where you can go and just go back and return it if you don't want it, which is something you can't do on like Facebook Marketplace. A lot of times you can't do that with like an eBay transaction. So it's just, you'll have that at least at your fingertips. But for the most part, I do think that we are going to be, the window is closing on these opportunities. And that's why I am taking advantage as much as I can now while they're still there. But you guys let me know what you think. I know the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo is probably over. Everyone's probably either flying back home or driving back home. They're heading back to their regular work week or their regular, 9 to 5. Hopefully you guys had a great time. I spent the weekend just taking advantage of my local mom and pop shops, GameStops, things like that. And I think I did okay. But you guys let me know what you think. How long do you think this GameStop window will last? I mean, it's already started to close. The deals are not as plentiful as they were even a year ago. But you guys let me know what you think, and I'll catch you in the next one. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.